All right, let's do this. So, Bryan Kachel has a really, I think, relatable view, to the process of injecting ink into people's skin, which is sort of unique, right? And he has this sort of really kind of human, personal quality to the way that he thinks about his work. And I think by listening to him talk, you get the sense that he really values the connections that he forms with his clients. I am confident that we're going to hear something really great here. So please join me in welcoming Bryan Kachel to the stage.
Okay. So first off, can everybody hear me? I'm notoriously soft-spoken. I apologize about that. First off, I want to say thank you so much to everybody, and there have been quite a few people that made it possible for me to be here, and thank you all. And thank you everybody that came. I'm deeply honored. So I want to apologize in advance that one of the downfalls of my profession is I tend to cuss like a sailor. I will try to keep it to a minimum, but please don't take offense. So my name is Bryan Kachel. I know it looks like it's spelled Kachel. I've only ever had one person in my life pronounce that right, and that was at that was in Amsterdam. The customs official looked at me and said, "Oh, do you speak Dutch?" I said, "Not at all." And they said, "Oh, well, your last name is Dutch." News to me. And then he pronounced my name correctly. So anyway, I have been tattooing in Seattle for about 10 years, and a little bit, I've tattooed longer than that, but professionally for about 10 years. And right now I work at a shop in Ballard called Rabbit Hands, and I am very fortunate to work with some amazing, amazing people as well as artists. And I don't know, they show me how to live well. So I feel like I've been flabbergasted by what I would possibly say worth value in here, and I feel like the only thing that anybody can say that's true is what's personal to you, and everything else is just rhetoric that somebody else taught you or showed you. So what I can tell you is my story, my loves, my passions, that I love tattooing. And what David was saying is absolutely true. I do value the connections that you get with people. That you have the potential to be very, very real with people very quickly. You're touching them. You're making them bleed, for goodness sakes. They're telling you some of the most intimate moments of their lives, and they want you to take these theories and put them into an image, and that's intense. That isn't something that's taken lightly. Yeah, every tattoo I do, I'm honored to get to do it. And people give you, sometimes they give you the exact specifics, and they come in, like just yesterday, I had a guy come in, and he had, to a T, like he had drawn this drawing, and he wanted that tattooed exactly so, and that's perfect. And other times, too. I think my dad is kind of a great example of both in some ways. My dad always calls me buddy, and he says, "Hey, buddy, I want to get something on my leg, something down low. You can do whatever you want, just whatever you want to do. That's great." Or a brontosaurus. And and that's just quintessentially my dad. And I thank him. It is because of him babysitting my little son and my wife. So I'm very grateful for that. For sure, for sure. Just like an ice cream cone. Awesome, awesome. Um, so another kind of great example of people giving me too much free reign, maybe, is I had a I had a client that I'd done a back piece on, and he he had one sleeve all the way done, and he we were kind of thinking about the next project we were going to do, and he said, "Well, hey, has anybody ever said just do whatever you want on their whole arm?" I was like, "No, absolutely not. Nobody's ever given me that kind of freedom." And he said, "Okay, well, I want it to be in color. I don't want it to be offensive, but the rest is up to you." And he said, "I just want it to be the best sleeve ever," was his exact quote. So no pressure. Um, and I stayed up nights thinking about all the possibilities, and we finally came up with something that he was excited about, and I still love it. It's one of my favorite tattoos. Um, but I thought it was even funnier when we got done with that, and his wife came in for a sleeve that she wanted to get done, and she said, "All I'm gonna tell you is I want it to be better than Jeremy's." um, so there are so many things that I love about tattooing, and one of my favorites it's all about progressing as an artist. And um, every yeah, that's what my life is about. It's constantly kind of that push, that in push. Um, when I was just an apprentice, um, I'm embarrassed to say that I was very cocky about my abilities as an artist because I have supportive parents, and I ended up in lots of situations where people would tell me that I was a great artist. And that's awesome for your pride. That is terrible for pushing you to get better. And what I really needed out of an apprenticeship was I needed somebody to critique my work harshly. And that's a hard thing to do, and everybody in the artistic community seems to see that that's valuable, but it's very hard because it's literally beating you down at your core, like, oh, your creation is not good in these ways. But to really be able to trim off that helps you to get to the essence of what you're trying to say and progress. Um, my first art assignment that I ever did was I was told to draw a skull with a dagger, very classic tattoo, and I was given a week and told to take my time, polish it, really refine it. And the very next day, after spending half an hour on the drawing, I brought it in like, ooh, I crushed it. And my teacher kind of, just you could see his shoulders just kind of slump, and he took a deep breath, and didn't say a word, just looked at it and he goes, "Put it in the file." And it got in my head, like that's super harsh. Um, and when I eventually started doing some small tattoos, he would come over and he would just kind of, peek over my shoulder at what I was doing, and all right, and just kind of walk off. And it definitely had the essence of if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all, which is brutal. Um, I remember one time I was doing like a T-Rex head on this guy's arm, and I had left the sketch in the back room in our little art space, and he came out. He just threw down an improved version next to me, and he said, "That's how I would have done it," and walked off. And it's brutal, man. Yeah, super harsh. It got in my head. It was supposed to get in my head. It was supposed to make me try harder. And I definitely cannot speak for anybody else, but that's what I needed. I needed somebody to show me day in and day out that if you already think you're great at whatever you're doing, you have nowhere to go. You have nowhere left to learn. Like if you've already got all the answers, no one can teach you. I needed to be shown that day in and day out. And with that, you can, if you can flip perspective from I have all the answers, how far do I have to go? Like just turn around on that road and see how far you could be traveling. Just a world of skill for you. And I think that's a valuable thing. Um, there is kind of a paradox in this, though, which is while you're in the middle, I can't speak for other art forms, but I can definitely speak for tattooing, that while you're in the middle of doing a tattoo, if you don't have a certain kind of cockiness to it, an arrogance almost, it doesn't have confidence it needs when it's done. You have to be thinking, like, man, I'm killing it while you're in the middle of it. Because if you lose that, it doesn't have strength. So you have to have almost a superiority slash inferiority complex. Do it well. You have to think how great you are in the moment, and then directly after, about how you do better. And that's what will get you to push and be better next time. And I love that. And if you don't have that confidence, you'll, I don't know, you won't get through kind of the middle of tattoo or middle of whatever creating, because that's the hard part. That's where every every piece of work, in my opinion, has kind of a life of its own. And when it's just a thought, it has, it's like a newborn, and it has this delicacy to it that if you think of something else, it's gone. And if you give it energy, it'll grow. And like all life forms, it get to the awkward teenage years eventually. And if you don't have the push to get through that, if you give up in those moments where it gets difficult, because every piece does, you won't get to see the potential that it could have reached. You have to see it. And I love that. It, you're creating these things that will take on a life of their own. Oh, yeah, absolutely. No worries, no worries. Okay. Um, so one of the questions that I was asked before um, before coming up here was, what do you wish you could have told your younger self? And what I wish I could have told my younger self was how much work anything that's valuable is worth. That I I thought somehow that, like, you see prodigies throughout your life and you think that that's what's valuable, is the people that just have this innate skill. And it's not valuable to me, or it's so rare that it's not worth comparing yourself against. That you need to put the time and the energy into it if it's going to be valuable. And um, I had a very cool experience recently where I tattooed one of the managers from Cirque du Soleil, and as a tip, he gave me a couple of tickets, and me and my wife were able to go to the show. It was fantastic, great show. And afterwards, um, the guy came up and he said, "Hey, do you want a backstage kind of tour?" Which was ridiculously cool. And we went backstage, and these people, these acrobats, had just been performing, and that was the second show of the night. And there they were still practicing. They were putting the time in. They'd just done 2 shows, days over, and they're jumping up on top of each other's shoulders 4 high in this back tent, making it look effortless, you know? And that's what it is. It's not effortless. It's all that effort from what they've been doing that makes what they're doing out on stage seem effortless. But you put the time in, and that's when it gets really valuable and it gets good. Just that any skill worth worth doing is not easily won. Um, and for all that the tattooing has given me, and it has given me so much. Um, I've met some of the best people in the world through tattooing. Um, I I was up in Victoria doing a guest spot, and I heard this artist, Jamer was his name, and he was a great artist, and he recently passed away. But I'm very lucky to have gotten to work with him. And he was talking to the apprentice at the shop that I was working at, and he was telling him, are you sure you want to do this? Like, really? You have to give up everything. And I think this is applicable in lots of other fields besides tattooing. But with tattooing, if you used to collect other things, now you'll collect tattoos. You know, if you used to talk about other things, now you will be asked to talk about tattoos. Um, Riding the bus, I will be talking about tattoos with people. It's day in, it's day out. My little son, who's 2 years old, one of his first words was tattoos, and he used it to mock me almost. I would start talking, and he would say, tattoos, tattoos. That he knew if I was talking, I was probably talking about tattoos. Um, that it becomes everything in your life, and I don't know. That's a big deal to trade it all for that one thing. And I don't know. I think it's worth it for me now in retrospect, having seen how much I've got in return. But it was a big trade, um, and I don't know. I struggle with that with my family life. You know, I it's a big deal to balance out where you feel like your priorities need to be in wanting to progress and continue to grow as an artist, and wanting to make sure you're present for your family, for your wife and your kids, you know. And I don't know, that's a big deal. They put up with a lot so that I can continue to practice and draw my whole weekend. And I don't know, I'm eternally grateful for that. Um, so if I had known how hard it was to really learn how to do this, I don't know that I would have had kind of the courage to go down this road. And this is probably true for lots of people of whatever path they've gone down. Um, I feel like creativity, kind of going back to the acrobat analogy. Um, I feel like tattooing for me is it's almost like a martial art. Like, you have to put the time in to get whatever skill it is you're trying to do with your hands. You have to make that so effortless that it's just a muscle memory. It's just something that you can do without thinking about it at all. And when you can really turn down the volume mind of all those thoughts, um, that's when that little quiet voice in the back of your mind that is inspiration can really kind of come forefront. That if you're so preoccupied with kind of the mundane details of whatever task you're doing, you miss that little voice that can give you a little hint, a little bit of a push to do something differently or out of the ordinary. Because otherwise, you're just going for status quo. And yeah, when you can really kind of quiet everything down, know what you're doing intimately, inspiration can strike. Um, but yeah, I think that's every skill that's worth possessing. Is kind of putting time. Um, so all of this being said, I know that tattooing isn't for everyone, and I don't think it should be. I like that there's a bit of an edginess to tattooing, um, that some people hate. Like, I think that's valuable too, and um, I'm not trying to convince anybody to get tattooed. what I want to get across is the importance of tattooing as art, uh, and honestly how to correctly judge people for the tattoos. Um, because if people see that I have a crawdad on my hand and immediately think that I'm a gangster, that's so far from the truth. Um, but it does say a lot about if you know how to look, how to kind of ask the right questions. Um, it'll tell you what type of person you are, and or at least what type of person you were when you got that tattoo. And I think that's valuable too. Uh, so if you know how to read a person's tattoos, they can tell you the amount of patience that that person has. Because to get a nice tattoo takes potentially a long time. I have a guy that I'm bodysuit on right now. We have been working on it for about 3 years. We have a long way to go, and that says a lot more about him than just, oh, that guy has a couple of tattoos. Um, it's it's a lot of patience. It's a lot of money. You have to be able to budget for that, for goodness sakes. That's an expensive project, and even small tattoos, they're not a cheap thing. You need to figure out how much it's worth to you financially to do something like that. And um, I think this is a great example. When I explained it a little while, my wife laughed because I have a lot of finished tattoos. But it can show you somebody's follow through or lack thereof. You know, like I have grand intentions, but I don't always have the follow through to see those things to the end. And I, um, I don't know. I think that a day is truly coming where, and this sounds oddly Martin Luther King esque, uh, but I think there's coming a time when people will not be judged for uh, whether or not you have tattoos, but rather the content of what those tattoos have to say. And I think Seattle is a very special place as far as this goes, and we're all very lucky to be here. Uh, that I've tattooed a lot of different kinds of business people, uh, doctors and lawyers, and all of them say the same thing, that jobs are carrying less and less whether people have tattoos. And I think that that's because employers, maybe I'm just out on a limb, but I think people are learning how to see the difference between good tattooing and not. And that's not to say that if somebody has a bad tattoo, that says something about them. You can grow beyond kind of your past mistakes and explain like, oh yeah, it's dumb, I got this. Um, and I have a few of those for sure. But it definitely it says a lot about individuals, the tattoos that they've chosen to carry with them. Uh, I think another amazing thing about tattooing is that no one can get a tattoo without getting a tattoo. Nobody is so well off. They can send their assistant in to get their tattoo for them. If you have a tattoo, you earned it, and that's yours, and no one can take it away from you. And there is a question that everybody has to ask themselves, which is how much pain am I willing to go through to get that? And the answer might be not at all, and that's fine. But if you've got it, you went through that pain. You got it. And there's an undeniable quality in that. And you have to make a commitment. And you have to make a stand. And I feel like, at least in my life, it's too easy to be a passive observer. It's too easy to just flip the screen and observe. And I truly appreciate you cannot get a passive tattoo. You have to be a part of it. Yeah, you have to make that commitment. So, one last thing before I open it up for questions, if there are any, is the other day at tattoo shop I was talking. We kind of always banter back and forth few of you guys have been there and know this to be true. Um, we're just talking about people we're tattooing, including them for sure, but just kind of passing out theories. And we were talking about perfection. And my friend Kristen Day said that she didn't think there was anything. She thought there was no such thing as a perfect tattoo. And I see where she was going with that. That it's we're not laser printers printing on paper. We're people tattooing other people, and there's so many kind of imperfections in that whole process. But I disagree. I I think that the perfection is in the humanity of it, and the handcraftedness of it. There's not enough places left that you can go and commission an artist to create a piece of artwork for. And I think that's a fading state of things. And I know that tattooing isn't the only place that this happens, but it's one of the last that a common person can reach. And I think that's something of value in our communities. That's it for me. Thank you. Did anybody have any questions? Or yes, of course, yeah. Mm. Um, I don't know if everybody could hear her, so I will repeat the question. She was asking me to speak about Japanese traditional tattooing. And yes, that absolutely interests me. Um, I could talk to you about this separately for hours and hours and hours. I could have done a whole talk just on that. Um, it's it's called tabori, where the hand poked method. And yes, I would absolutely love to learn it. I've actually talked about trying to get my hands on some tabori instruments. Um, it's I feel like what really draws me in about Japanese tattooing in particular is that the aesthetic. Let me go back. There's old books about primitive tattooing that you can find, and if you look at around kind of the 1800s when explorers were really going out documenting these things, Japanese tattooing was crushing it compared to everywhere else. They had hundreds and hundreds of years jumped the gun on what good-looking tattoos were and knew how to make them last, hold, and stand a lifetime's worth of use. And I feel like in the 1990s here, there was like a tattoo renaissance that went on in San Francisco, and uh, a lot of people were trying to kind of throw out all the knowledge and just jump forward, and some amazing discoveries were made. But there's a lot of the traditional things that people are kind of coming back to now, and the longer you see somebody tattooing more, they kind of tend to gravitate towards those traditional looks because they hold up a time. I can absolutely chat more about that with you, and I would be happy to come talk to you and just rap about Japanese tattooing. Yeah. Um, yes. Oh, talk about my personal life, for goodness sakes. I would be happy to. Um, yeah, my kind of, I don't know if everybody heard that question. She was asking about kind of my personal history and how I got into tattooing with supportive parents. My my parents were both oceanographers, and both my brothers are scientists, and they fully expected to have three little scientists on their hands. And I, my my wife and my brother's wives both joke that if we had said we wanted to be a pterodactyl our parents would have said, "You can do it." Um, that yeah, whatever our dreams were, they fully endorsed, and uh, they signed me up for every art class they could think. Uh, if nobody knows about it, the experimental college is a fantastic place to go to a million art classes, different types. I did that growing up, and I was always the little kid in these art classes with a room full of adults. It was fantastic. Uh, and anyway, my mom was not stoked when I got my first piercing. I came back trip and I had my lip pierced, and she went running around the front yard, fake dry heaving, and all I could make out was mutilating your body. Um, but she, uh, when I became a tattooer, I had kind of fallen in with a crowd of folk that had a lot of tattoos, and a lot of them started having designed their tattoos from about the time I was 15 on, and at that point, it's just a matter of time. I needed to get into it. I was so curious, and um, so I would talk to them about it. And when I eventually was offered apprenticeship, I skipped home that day, and I called up my dad, and I, you know, was like, "I got great news. I'll tell you when I see you." And he was just like, "Oh, I thought that might have been it, or you were having a baby, one or the other, great news either way." And so they were just ridiculously supportive. My dad didn't have a single tattoo uh, when I started tattooing, and I asked him just recently, and he said he had no interest in getting tattooed before I became a tattooer. Just because I became a tattooer, knew that he had to get tattooed by me, which yeah, I, uh, yeah. Mm. So, mm. Um, the question was about learning kind of the finesse of lettering in tattooing, and I absolutely agree. And I think it goes back to what I was talking about with muscle memory. Um, that once you have these kind of flows down, that's when creativity really comes in for the different flows of each letter. And yeah, some tattooers are definitely really good at it. Some phoning it in. Um, but I agree that I don't know. It's a very different medium, and the trick with lettering is there's a lot of lettering tattoos that are just print on the body, and I think that looks great short term. It's a scary thing long term because tattooing has to consider all these different elements, like the fact that it's on the body and it's going to move those particles slowly over the course of a lifetime. And you see people with just piles and piles of lettering, and I get really scared to imagine that, you know, 20 or 30 years later, with all these tiny letters, and they're just going to be together. So one of the hardest things about kind of the finesse of tattooing letter is giving it enough room to breathe and making sure that you add flowiness to it, that it will flow well no matter how the person is moving the body. That's a huge consideration. Yeah. Um, um, the question was about what inspires me, and I I feel the most inspiration from watching anybody do their craft well. That is phenomenal to me. when me and my wife traveled in Central America, we stopped at this place and we met this amazing family. And the father, the group, um, they brought such a little amount of things with them, but he brought some carving tools. And watching him sit there, just carve, and then for nights and nights and nights on end, just polish this spoon he had carved, just to perfection. You know, that human element, it was a perfect spoon. And that that inspires me, is seeing anybody watch my buddy Mike's videos, for goodness sakes, just watching a myriad of artists that are around really push themselves. That's where I get my internal inspiration to work hard, better, whatever I'm doing. But artistically, nature, like, you can't go looking at nature, just get out of natural things, and it's every time like you feel inspired to create creation sense. Eh. Um, um, some some very kind of low ones, yes. Yes. Uh-huh. The question was about how to uh, find, or the first step in getting tattooed, and I think a lot of people do it through uh, asking a friend. I think word of mouth is the hugest part of this business, and that that's amazing. I love that people go to their friends first in that kind of situation. Uh, the people that I am intimidated by are the kinds of people, I can only speak for myself, but have found me not because I was recommended, but because they put in the legwork to look at all these different artists and see who inspired them, who is creating the kind of look, that, hard to explain style that they were after. And I think a lot of people kind of new to the process look for subject matter in people's portfolios, and that has nothing to do with it. If the person has the style, they will bring that to whatever subject matter they're doing. So I think that is the key, is to put the time to find the right person, and kind of don't take the easy way out. Go to the tattoo shop just down the street just because it's down the street, and that might be where you end up, but look elsewhere first, right? Um, Tons. The question was about technology, uh, kind of going to tattooing, and kind of the new technology that I seeing that is making a difference. Here, let me go back. It's um, kind of the Tabori method, the Japanese kind of hand poke method, has a magic to it that you can only get that way, uh, hands down. Where this is oddly technical, but you're only, with a tattoo machine, it's set up at an angle, and you can only go into the skin and out of the skin at the exact same angle because it's going roughly 100 times a second. So you can't change that in that millisecond. But with hand tattooing, you can. You can go in at one end and then tilt it and pull it back at a different angle, so you can leave more ink per strike. And that's amazing that in 10 strikes by hand, you can leave the same amount of black that it would take 2,000 strikes with a tattoo machine. So it's a lot less damage to the skin doing it. Right? And there are, I don't know, none of the technology is new per se. The inks have gotten so much better because the quality control is up a lot. I will read old that tattooers wrote to each other back in the day. It's horrendous. The stuff they used to put in. And I mean, you read about prison tattoos and melting checker pieces and burning baby oil and all kind of gross stuff to get whatever ink they were going to inject themselves. Um, but tattoo machines, they're people keep trying to push it and keep trying to finesse it. Some innovative people that are trying to change. Um, it's weird to say, but like the size of brushes that you can use. Um, and yeah, it's, yeah, Brian. Mhm. Yeah. Mhm. Um, so much of kind of the time people are talking to you about what tattoo they might want to get, they're almost approaching it from this cavalier stance. So, kind of ironically, I've had to take the opposite. I've had to be the fear for them and explain to them, like, no, that's not going to look good, um, and talk them out of potentially bad ideas. Um, so, when I hear the kind of fears that are easily dismissed, like, oh, how can you not just like, hey, here it is, see it for what it is, and it doesn't hold any weight. That if you look at an 8-year-old person's skin, are you really like, man, that is some sexy skin? I that's what I want my skin to look like when I'm 80. No, nobody's nobody's longing to have that skin act as it is. Nothing wrong with it. It's just part of being human. But if you look at an 8-year-old that is covered in tattoos, I cannot speak for anybody else here. That is amazing to me. That looks like that person has lived a life, and I want to talk to that person. I want to hear their stories. Yeah, so being able to just kind of own those fears and then dismiss them. Yeah, it's a good question. It is. Uh, the question was, what do I do outside of art to sharpen my eye for detail? And I think a lot of it is just practice and kind of practicing drawing, just kind of having thoughts about what makes that thing, kind of what gives the thing its essence. Um, like just today, I was looking at a picture of samurai sword, and I saw the wrapping, and I just noticed the detail about it that I'd never noticed about how to give it a square look while having this wrap going around it, twisting, going back, twisting again. And I've seen samurai swords a lot, and being able to just continue to look at things that inspire to really kind of catch that new detail. It's gonna to yeah, absolutely. Uh, there's so many variables. It's hard to say. The question was how to uh, talk to somebody about evolving a tattoo that they have that they might want to change. And if somebody has a tattoo that they want to keep, most of the time you could kind of clean that up. And like go over the blacks and add some color depth where there wasn't before, uh, where you could expand upon it. Uh, add. I feel like a lot of tattoos that people really don't like are because they're lacking flow with the body. That it was potentially put on there and it was the wrong size body part, wrong place on the body, that it doesn't kind of accentuate the fact that it's on the body. And I feel like that's a big one that can kind of expand by subtle additions to kind of give it a flow, give it some life. So yeah, it's a hard. There's so many variables. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. It is, and it's a phenomenal question. Kind of the question is almost how to thin out the tattoos that you're doing, like make those choices of what you're gonna do or not. And I battle with that every day. I really do. I I'm not up here to try to get business at all. I've actually stopped taking on new people for a little while because I got. I think this mic just went out. I don't know if anybody's hearing me. I'll just speak up. Um, I I got booked out about 8 months, and that was too much for me. It's too hard to fight that far in advance. Me and my wife were going for encounters next Christmas, and that's too much to think. If we didn't plan what to do some 8 months ago, like or on like some booked, and I'm I'm trying to go about simpler things, just doing it at a time, just so I can have a couple of bits. And I'll start 2016, but it's um, it's a tricky thing because everybody's about it, and I'm not trying. Like I love big Japanese stuff, obviously. The question hit home for me very well, but I don't just want to do that. There's an ism in that that I don't appreciate, and I love actions that you have. You have the power to change a life. So I have been right now just finishing up people that I'm constantly insistent working on right now. Eventually, yeah, it's a hard. One more question. Um, I feel like most tattooers' exit strategy is a tattoo shop, and that's why we have too many tattoo shops. Um, it's because everybody's retirement plans have a tattoo shop. No, I do not have exit strategy. Is the short answer.